renowned colleague in electrical engineering. He is specialized in renewable energy, and he accepted to meet you today, and let us enjoy the great lecture.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bahrawi, for inviting me. My slides today will be a mixture of bilingual slides. Some are Arabic and some are in English. Please feel free to stop me or pause at any time to allow me to respond to any of your clarifications. Today we'll be speaking about the Egyptian experience in promoting the use of renewable energies primarily for the sake of producing electricity, as well as using electricity from sustainable sources, and what we refer to as renewable energies. And I will have a small introduction. The development of renewable energies in Egypt started around 7,000 years ago. Started when the old pharaohs utilized the available renewable energy sources at the time, which is the sun, in lighting some of their temples and so on, as well as in the wind for sailing boats across the Nile. Around 110 years ago, a very prominent project was conducted in the area of Maadi in the southern part of Cairo city. That the project was developed by an American called Frank Schumann. He had solar collectors, as seen here in the picture. It was based on a parabolic trough structure, and it was used at the time. It was manufactured at the time from thin metal foil, heating a water tube in the focal point of the parabolic trough. This heat did heat the water and then eventually produce steam. This steam was used to rotate an electric generator. That electric generator was used to drive some water pumps for irrigation needs. That was done in 1913 of the last century, and it was a successful project. But with the approach of the World War and the project has stopped. But it showed that at the time, solar energy was people started to use it in a commercial way. Actually, as seen on the screen here, Frank Schumann himself wrote, I'm sure of the human race should either utilize solar energy directly or go back to pre-civilization. So it was very clear at the time that solar energy is a savior to generate energy, especially electric energy. So actually, in this example, both thermal energy was utilized through heating the water in the central tube in the middle of in the focal point. And if you can follow my mouse here, it was in the focal point of the this parabolic trough, and it's shown here that heated the water, and this water was turned to steam. This steam did turn generators to produce to run pumps to pump water for irrigation. 110 years ago, in Egypt here, we had, sorry, 60 years ago, we had the high dam, and the high dam was built to also to actually control the level of water in the Nile, especially in the flood season in the summer. And the high dam was reduced to two purposes. One of them is the primary purpose and to control the water level for different irrigation needs all over the year, as well as a secondary product to produce electricity. At the time, in the early 60s, the generated electricity from the high dam was the main large-scale electric generation in the country, and it was the largest electric generator in the country, and electricity produced from it was primarily used to supply electricity to one of the large industrial users in the area in the southern part of Egypt, which is the Kima factory, as well as at the same time, Egypt started to build its unified electricity grid. So the electric energy from the high dam turned to be accessible after that to all parts of the country. Yeah, coming over the last 35 years, this is an Egyptian agency called the Renewable Energy Authority, or the New and Renewable Energy Authority, was established in 1986. And since then, this agency, at the time when it was built, was the target of potentially conducting research in the area of renewable energies, as well as to do some demo projects in the area of utilizing renewable energy, specifically in wind and solar energy. At the time, in the late 1980s and over the 1990s, the idea of or the even the technical feasibility for these projects, for these wind and solar energy projects, from a technical point of view, the feasibility of them did exist, while the financial feasibility was a bit challenging when compared to electricity generation, either from hydraulic sources, from hydro sources, or from fossil fuel sources, where burning the fuel, either the gas fuel or the liquid fuels, were from, as I said, from a financially point of view, the conventional power generation was more attractive from a financial point of view. And given that Egypt did not have a strong, at the time, did not have a strong financial status, as in other countries as well. So the conventional or conventional electricity generation from fossil fuels did prevail at the time. What's shown here, I will go through it in detail in the next few slides, but it does show the activity of NERIA. NERIA published on quarterly basis a statistics called NERIA meter, showing the different activities of the New and Renewable Energy Authority, which is primarily the generation of electricity from the renewable energy sources, as well as also conducting some tests for energy efficiency of equipment to measure the energy efficiency of equipment, as well as the quality of some of the renewable energy components and so on. The current status of NEREA or the current status of the installed capacities based on the latest quarterly report issued in October of 2021, it indicates that the installed capacity of renewable energy sources did exceed the 6,000, actually 6,110 megawatts. That's almost 10% of the 10% of the overall installed generation capacity in Egypt, and it presents almost also 20% of the peak demand of the electricity demand. The breakdown of these projects came from public projects as well as private sector projects. In the public sector projects, the hydro is the largest, with a little bit more than 2,800 megawatts. That's primarily the Aswan Reservoir, as well as the High Dam, and some mini hydro stations along the River Nile, in addition to a number of wind projects which exceed the 1,100 megawatts of wind projects, and they are primarily in the area of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Suez, where our wind regimes are high, one of the highest around the world, where we are privileged with wind speed in the order of 10 to 12 meters per second. That present an excellent resource for wind energy. In addition to that, we have concentrated solar power. Sorry, there is a typo mistake here. The concentrated solar power is 20 megawatts. Maybe I should correct it while speaking. And it is actually located in an area called El-Bahrawy. Then that's in the southern part of Giza Governorate. And El-Bahrawy project is a hybrid project between a conventional power plant as well as a concentrated solar power plant, very similar to the Schumann project in Maadi 110 years ago. This project produces electricity with a capacity of 20 megawatts. In addition to that, we have a generation of electricity also from a solar source, but based on the photovoltaic concept, which produces electricity based on some chemical reactions, static chemical reactions within solar panels, and we have currently 26 megawatts of solar energy produced from these sources. In addition to that, the private sector contribution does exceed the 2,100 megawatts of private sector projects in the country, based on technical and financial attractiveness. We have around 1,465 megawatts under what we call a feed-in tariff scheme, which I will explain in the next few slides. This project, this FIT project or PV project, they are PV FIT projects, and they are located in the area of Bimban. They are primarily private sector, as I said, and they are of primarily solar panels. In addition to that, we have 120 megawatts also PV project, but under another contractual scheme. This 120 megawatts also are of a solar PV project, but they are based on a BOO type project, build, own, operate project. We have 510 megawatts of wind projects also in the area of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Suez. It's primarily in an area called Jabal Zayt, and they amount to 110 megawatts of wind energy. In addition to that, recently, with the acceptance of generating electricity from biofuels, from agriculture waste to produce biofuels, we have currently 12 megawatts projects which are producing biofuels, primarily methane, and running some electric generators based on that, and the electricity is sold to electric utilities. Actually, all these projects, the electricity produced from these projects are sold to electricity to the electricity grid, to the high voltage grid, except for the solar PV 120 megawatts, which are operated under what we refer to as a net metering scheme. In that scheme, the generation electricity is first used locally at the area of production, and then after that, the remaining part of it is sold to the network. In addition to the projects mentioned, we have 303 megawatts of projects under construction. They are primarily in the public arena, where we have 250 megawatts of wind projects, which are also built by the state, and 50 megawatts, which are PV projects, also are built by the state. And then we have a 3 megawatt in the bio area. A number of projects are under development, which means we are still in the early stages. They are planned projects, but they yet are going through some technical verification and detailed design and securing finance for them. In the public arena, we have around 70 megawatts of solar PV projects. In the private sector, we have a little bit more than 3,500 megawatts. These 3,500 megawatts are the breakdown of them around 700 megawatts of solar PV, 2,800 megawatts of wind energy, and 51 megawatts of bioenergy. The nice thing also is I'm just showing you here a daily statistics which is issued by the Egyptian Electricity Regulatory Agency and Consumer Protection. It shows the left side of it, which is shown here totally in green. It shows that the available electricity in Egypt was available across the 24 hours, around the 24 hours. If any interruption would have occurred, then a red or a yellow color would have showed up, and just showed that the electricity was available around the 24 hours. It's nice to know also that the electricity in Egypt, the current available electricity in Egypt, is accessible to over 99.5% of the population of Egypt. The pie chart in the middle of that shows the breakdown of the available the sources of the available electricity, and it's primarily the yellow part showing it is coming from gas-fired power plants, as well as plants which are using fuel number 6 or fuel number 2, which is in the red part. The green and is the available electricity from solar and wind, while the blue part is showing um, the available electricity from hydro sources. The right side of this daily statistics, it showed the peak electric load of the country, and that peak load in around 1 year did reach so far 33,000 megawatts, 33 gigawatts, and now the electric load, the maximum load is around the 26,000 megawatts. Well, there is not a lot of air conditioning loads and so on. It also shows the amount of savings from fuel. It shows that based on the average of the Egyptian electric system, that with each 1 kilowatt hour, produced in the country from a renewable energy source, any renewable energy source, we are saving around 180 grams of oil equivalent, 181 grams of oil equivalent per 1 kilowatt hour. So we are saving this fuel. We are not using this hydrocarbon fuel to generate electricity. Instead, we are using renewable energy sources. Also, that corresponds to an avoided over 170 grams of carbon dioxide not produced into the environment, which is a high thing. And also that makes Egypt and most of its renewable energy projects is acceptable for funding from international financial entities, institutions, as well as it did attract in the past implementing projects under the Kyoto Protocol, and I believe it will attract more financing instruments, different financing instruments to finance renewable energy projects in the country based on the activities of the COP, the recent COP, since the COP19 in Paris until COP26 in Glasgow, England, and hopefully next year the COP will be, the Conference of Parties will be conducted here in Egypt, will be carried on here in Egypt, in Sharm el-Sheikh. Well, that project, that slide, I wanted to show that no, it's not possible to have a successful operation from both a technical and financial point of view unless it is strongly backed up with a legislation. And I'd like to say it's always a side note, which I hope you all agree with me. We are not officially born until we have a birth certificate. We are not officially graduates in different disciplines until we have an education, a graduation certificate, and all of this is the legislative background. And even though we are not officially that until we have a birth certificate. So sorry, a death certificate. So anyway, so in Egypt, since the early 80s, there was a number of different legislation at different legislation levels. These legislation levels differ from a law or a cabinet of minister decree or ministerial decrees, or circulars, administrative circulars to support the activity of renewable energies. As I mentioned earlier, the establishment of the Renewable Energy Authority in 1986 did pave the way to a number of implementations in the area of renewable energies, even though at the time they were not financially attractive. There are also a number of legislation related to the environment of investment facilities in the country did help in that, as well as the establishment in the late 90s of the regulatory agency of electricity. Another legislation was recently issued in 2014, in the last quarter of 2014. It indicated what's referred to as the feed-in tariff. It indicates primarily with whichever electricity is produced from renewable energy, the state, the electric utilities are obliged to buy this electricity at a certain announced value, and that value would last over 25 years, 20 to 25 years. That definitely attracted investment because attracted investment and the financing of this investment. Furthermore, a law was issued to the development of renewable energy schemes. That law was issued in December 2014. It's called Law 203, and that law will go through the details, some of the highlights and details of this law in the next few slides, as well as the state has designated almost 7,000 square kilometers of area where large-size projects of producing electricity from renewable energy can take place. Based on this, there is a potential of 30 gigawatts of potential utilization of solar energy and around 60 gigawatts of electricity produced from wind energy. Also, the new and renewable energy authority did produce what's referred to as the wind atlas, as well as the solar atlas, where the area of Egypt was clearly the different areas in the country were indicated where there is good wind regimes and good solar radiation is possible. All of this was backed up with the highest level of legislation, which is the Constitution, which was issued in 2014, and especially Article 32 of this Constitution, where it indicated clearly that the state is committed. I'll say it in Arabic also, الدولة ملتزمة in making the best use of renewable energy resources, motivating investment, and encouraging relevant scientific research to the development of renewable energies, and it's the development of working on the R&D for technical and financial and economical feasibilities related to this to these activities. And this is the highest legislation. Not too many countries around the world do have clearly stated that in their constitution. This is just a summary of what I have already mentioned regarding the development of different legislation related to the support of renewable energy projects, and primarily to the support of the production of electricity from renewable energy sources. Uh, in addition to that, Egypt embarked on setting an energy strategy. This energy strategy indicated that we have a target for the contribution of renewable energies by in year 2022 to have 20% of renewable energy sources contributing to the system, and the breakdown of these renewable energy sources were broke down between hydro and solar PV and wind. Actually, let me tell you a couple of statistical numbers here regarding the 20%. We have reached 20% the installed capacity of renewable energy sources. The installed capacity, which is 6,000 megawatts, did reach the 20% of the peak demand. This peak demand was reported 2 years ago to be 30 gigawatts, and the 6,000 megawatts does represent the 20% from a capacity point of view. While from an energy point of view, we are currently around 12% of renewable energy sources contributing to the overall electricity energy mix in the country. The strategy, which is also currently being updated, but the strategy indicates or have a target in year 2035, which was also updated to reach the year 2040. The contribution of renewable energy should reach 42% from the electricity energy mix at year 2040. 3% of them is coming from concentrated solar power and 22% from photovoltaic, as well as 14% from wind. And at the time, it is expected that the hydro will present 2%. The hydro as an absolute number hasn't changed, but its relevant size to the other energy sources which are growing is increasing. So the percentage contribution of hydro is getting smaller and smaller, while its absolute number hasn't changed or will not change as well. Actually, this strategy is currently being updated, and initial figures shows that the contribution of renewable energy might exceed the 60% by year 2040. This target of the almost 60% or around the 60% will contribute a lot to either exporting exporting electricity from renewable energy sources to other countries, primarily to Europe, as well as utilizing this renewable energy in producing what's referred to as the green hydrogen. Let me go on sort of the turning point of in the development of renewable energy sources in the history. As I said, initially started in 1986, where the Renewable Energy Authority was established, and in order really to pave the way regarding conducting a number of research and development ideas, as well as doing some limited demo projects with the support of development partners like the Denmark, Japan, Germany, and other countries around the world in helping in establishing these demo projects, while the technical feasibility did exist maybe, but at the time the financial feasibility was not clearly valid at the time. The law 203, which was issued in December 2014, was a huge turning point. At the time, this law was actually a part of the Unified Electricity Law, which was issued later on in 2015, July 2015. Yet, that part of the law, of the electricity law, was extracted to be issued as a standalone law for the indicating the schemes to promote the use, the generation of electricity from renewable energy sources. This this law indicated 4+1 schemes. I'll go through the 4 schemes now, and I will leave the 5th scheme, which I will mention in a few minutes. The first scheme did indicate an existing at the time current exercising of a bidding process, but it was not under the umbrella of a law, which is the bidding scheme. And the bidding scheme is really, this bidding scheme is divided into 2 parts. One part is under what we call engineering, procurement, and construction. Engineering, procurement, and construction, and these projects are owned by NEREA, the New and Renewable Energy Authority. The EPC means engineering, procurement, and construction. So these are projects which are financed by the New and Renewable Energy Authority. This finance comes from the revenues of NEREA, and they are usually through loans, and it's based on a competitive bidding, based on technical requirement as well as financial bidding. So this is the first scheme, the bidding scheme, the EPC scheme, and it also at a later stage included EPC plus finance. So the bidders would also come with a potential financer which NEREA might benefit from. The second bidding scheme, it's called the Build, Own, Operate scheme, the BOO, where bidders compete to build a project, and they get their money back from the sales of electricity to the transmission company from these sources. So it's called the Build, Own, Operate scheme, and the calls of these projects are called upon by the Egyptian Electricity Transmission Company, which handles electricity at the high voltage and extra high voltage levels, and a number of these projects also were conducted. So these bidding schemes are currently 2 tools which are utilized by state entities, the transmission company, as well as the new and renewable energy company. The third scheme was called the Independent Power Producer, the IPP scheme, and that IPP scheme did exist earlier before the issuance of the law as a general scheme, so it's applied to either renewable energy sources or non-renewable energy resources. That scheme is basically to generate electricity at one part at the developer area and sells electricity to end users. The bidding scheme, actually, the sales of electricity are, as I said, to the transmission company under a single buyer model. For the IPP scheme, it's sort of business to business type scheme where they utilize the available networks only to transmit electricity and, of course, get the transmitting or distribution networks get paid for that through wheeling charges. The fourth scheme, which was at the time the jewel of the crown, is the feed-in tariff scheme. In that scheme, the state indicated two targets. It targeted actually three targets: 2,000 megawatts of wind energy projects, 2,000 megawatts of PV projects, and 300 megawatts of small size PV projects. In that scheme, in that first call, the announced value for electricity was for solar type projects were around the 14.2 American cents per kilowatt hour, and for solar from electricity from solar PV projects, and around 1 Egyptian pound for electricity produced from small PV size projects, and around 8 cents per kilowatt hour from wind energy projects. So all the prices were quite attractive, and these projects did attract at the time, if I recall properly, or especially for the large size projects. These large size projects attracted over 180, if I recall, 186 developers, and out of which there was around 120 in the solar field and around 100 in the wind field. They were all qualified based on their technical and financial capabilities, and they were all after these feed-in tariff projects, because these feed-in tariff projects were guaranteed at the time and still guaranteed for 20 years for wind and 25 years for solar projects. Not sure if there is any clarification at the moment. Okay. Please raise your hand if you would like to ask any questions or have any clarifications for me. Now, this feed-in tariff scheme, that was first experience for Egypt in the large promotion of large size generation projects. It was quite challenging at the time, and a number of three questions were raised. Can these schemes all coexist at the same time? And the answer was yes. And did they really coexisted? Also, the answer to that, or the clarification was, did they coexisted fully or partly or none? So actually, as a matter of fact, they existed partially, and they do still exist in a partial way, where some of these projects or some of these schemes prevail based on their technical and financial attractiveness, especially that the investment costs for the different technologies, especially the PV project, did drop by around 90% over the last 10 years. So the level of investment did drop dramatically for some of the technologies. This is just a map, shows you the area of been banned, and in the southern part of Aswan of Egypt, and it shows you the number of developers there. The number of developers there are 32 developers so far, and they were restricted to at the beginning to have only 50 megawatt of a project in order to avoid any monopoly in the activity. So it just shows you here the map at one stage between the different developers. Are they at the level of construction, performing, or developing? So most of the projects, most of the plots were 50 megawatts, except 2 or 3 projects were in the size of 20 and 30 megawatts. And there was a commitment from the state to buy all of this electricity. The financial international financial institutions did have a number of concerns and clarification regarding these agreements, and they were responded to over a certain time, over a certain level of time before going into a financial closure and securing these projects. In the first phase of the feed-in tariff, there was only one project who managed to secure the financial closure, and it was 50 megawatt project. And then the remaining projects were achieved through a second phase of a feed-in tariff, where the feed-in tariff value did go down to around 8 American cents per kilowatt hour, out of which 30% were to be paid in Egyptian currency. That's because of the reduction of this feed-in tariff was due to the reduction of the cost of the technology itself. This is regarding the PV project. Regarding the wind and on the large scale, regarding the small scale, a number of projects did materialize on the level of distribution networks, but because these projects had to do with small size implementations at maybe small factories or residential areas, did not reach the 300 megawatt target. Regarding wind energy project, it was requested by the international financing institution to have longer time for data verification, for resource verification. So none of these projects did materialize under a feed-in tariff, but a couple of them were realized under the bidding scheme through a BOO type scheme. Let me, and hopefully you can follow the Arabic slide. I will say some of the observations, challenges, and potentials for renewable energy projects. And I will say that based on the gained experience from implementing law 203 for year 2014. The first observation, as I said, that a number of schemes were adopted at the same time, so they can be implemented all at the same time. The EPC plus finance, the build, own, operate, and independent power producer, as well as the fit-in scheme, which also did have a small alteration later on, as we call the net metering scheme. But the net metering scheme was not issued through a law, but it was issued through an order or an administrative circular. That's what's referred to in Arabic as كتب دورية, كتاب دوري. If we look at the other observation is that we found a lot of entities in the country were involved: the investment authority, the city authority, and some of the end user agencies representing end users and so on. So there was a number of entities working on and organizing and activities between them was a bit of a challenge. Also is the second observation, which is what is referred to in English is eating while cooking. So الحصد أثناء الزراعة, where we found that because a lot of entities were quite enthusiastic and so on, so they thought that implementing generation of electricity from renewable energy resources was a click of a button, but it turned to be not like that. Even though the technical and financial feasibilities did exist, but a number of legislation coordinating the relation between the service providers and off-takers had to be dealt in a very clear way regarding these contracts. You can imagine. I remember that the International Financial Institution had 179, if I recall, observations or clarifications which needed to be clearly indicated. Some of them are simple as minimum take or pay, or an arbitration where the arbitration would take place and so on. So that had to be dealt with before securing any finance. Also, the cost of service was an issue. The cost of service an issue because it's coming from different resources regarding the type and regarding the location. Like, for example, in wind energy in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Suez area, the wind regime, as I indicated earlier, is high, is around 10 to 12 meters per second, while in other areas, also in the western part of Egypt, west of the Nile, the wind speed is around 5 to 6 meters per second. So even though it is the same resource, but the availability of the resource regarding its amount and the durations is different. So that makes the cost of providing the service is different. Also, the time of implementation is an issue. Where are you implementing in year X or a couple of years later on? Because I said the technologies, most of the technologies, especially the PV technology, the photovoltaic technology, went through a lot of developments, especially after the contribution of China in that area, and the investment cost and the cost of producing the photovoltaics did drop tremendously. So when, according to the type of the resource and the nature of the resource, as well as the time of the resource, and at the time of the resource, as well as the cost of investment. At the time in 2014 and then the following years, the Egyptian economy, which was ranked at a B level, and in some cases even at a B minus level, as compared to other countries, for example, example, in Morocco or in the Gulf area, the Arab Gulf area, the economy at these countries was high in the A level, and so it did attract investments, and also it attracted investments at a low cost of finance. So I'm just saying that because whenever you're comparing prices and so on, and comparing, especially in the feed-in tariff or the BOO value, you need to take into consideration not only the technical issues, but also the cost of finance. This is what I was referring to already, that we had at the time, with a part of it was a challenge that we had different price signals coming from neighboring countries all around the world, from Southern America and so on. So it needs to be looked at in a very careful way when comparing between these prices and the attractiveness of these prices. Also, in Egypt, we had the single buyer model, and the commitment of the state to supply electricity to everyone. So moving to the IPP scheme and so on, needed and still needs the gradual movement towards a new form of an electricity market, and the electricity sector through the activities of Egypt, the Egyptian Electricity Regulatory Agency, is looking into these regulations and developing them in a gradual way to provide a technical, or sort of a smooth migration between a single buyer model to a competitive market model. The general feature, as I mentioned earlier, it was so that click up a bottom, it turned to be not to, and then all of these schemes, the four schemes indicated by law 203, did promote or were directed to the part of what is referred to as the pushing type schemes. It's promoting the generation of electricity from renewable energy sources, while it did not directly promote the use of renewable energy. So it did address the production in comparison to the level of to the use of renewable energies, and of course the different implications of that. Here, I'll just just a quick summary of the different policies adopted for renewable energy projects. There is main policies and there is supplementary policies. There is pricing policies and there is quantitative policies. On the main policy side, in the pricing policies, a feed-in tariff is usually the highest level of these policies, and it does work in actually more than 75 countries around the world. On the quantitative type policies, which is called the quota, where you can refer to as a percentage target, either at the level of supply or the level of use. This quantitative approach or quota approach did not prevail in many countries, even though Law 203, as I mentioned, there was 4+1 scheme, and the fifth scheme is a quota scheme, but it's an optional scheme where the state, through the cabinet of ministers, can impose a certain level of a percentage of renewable energies to be in the market either at the level of generation or at the level of end users in order to fulfill a certain target level. The supplementary policies is basically like contractual long-term contracts, energy banking, where you are exchanging electricity between service providers and the network, or provide some tax reductions and so on, or you provide some soft loan. So all of these schemes can be partly or collectively implemented. Some of these, this is, I'll go through a few slides here quickly. Some of these schemes support the development of capacities, and some of them support the development of use of kilowatt hour. And some of them promote capacity, megawatts, kilowatts, and so on. And some of these schemes provide schemes to help the promotion of the use of the energy from renewable energy sources. Again, I'll refer here to what's being developed within the Conference of Parties, the COP, regarding the promotion of renewables, either on the level of a capacity or the level of use. Here is actually what's needed in Egypt. It's what we had, as I said, pushing schemes to promote the generation, but also we need an additional what we call pooling schemes, آليات جاذبة أو ساحبة. The pooling schemes, that is something which I think we further need at the coming stages in order to fulfill the higher contribution of renewable energies in the electricity market, in the electricity mix. So that's, I'll just give some quick example of a pooling scheme is that the renewable energy source can be a competitive source or the only source. Like I will give you an example here is, for example, the agriculture project in the west side of the Nile, where renewable energies are competitive to emergency type reciprocating engines, diesel generators, where the cost of fuel is expensive because the cost of transportation of fuel as well as its price and its fluctuation, or it's the only source as compared to renewable energies can be the only source, and it even can be combined with potential storage of water. And this is in comparing that with extending the electricity, unified electricity networks to these areas. Another possible advantage is that we can have a number of advantages related to environment impact and so on, like you can announce in any product you produce that a certain level of a certain percentage of renewable energy were used in the production of this product or of these goods or these of food and so on, and that would allow a competitive edge for the use of renewable energy. And again, is the percentage quota. As I said, for agriculture needs, renewable energy sources can be a standalone which provide electricity for 6 or 7 hours a day. And even though the water might not be used directly for irrigation at the time, but the water can be stored and then used at a certain time for water irrigation. As I said, in some of the projects, the environment benefits might be transferred to competitive edge regarding exports of products and so on. Earmarking the renewable energy sources is a potential way, and there is a bit of research in that area for earmarking renewable energy sources. I'll just give you an example, a numerical example on the quota. Here it shows it's historical information a little bit. This is just showing the industrial, the use of the industrial sector. In Egypt, the green part, the shaded part, or the solid part is the existing with its potential of growth, as well as the red part shows the additional industrial activity. If a quota system was implemented at a 3%, either on the level of supply or the level of use, that would motivate the existence of renewable energy projects. That would lead to a contribution of around 6 gigawatts of renewable energies as a capacity in 9 years, and it would end up with that the industrial sector would have been using 27% of its electricity use from renewable energy sources. Having said that, I would like to confirm that we cherish the sun. The sun is really the source of wind and so on, and many sources of the renewable energy, and we still cherish that until today. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that I would have allowed 10 to 15 minutes of clarification if needed. Thank you very much all for listening, and I welcome any clarifications and so on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sobki, for your great presentation. We learned a lot. Now we open the floor for the students if they have any questions. Dr. Sobki, maybe the students are shy now. Can I ask you an important question in my mind all the time?
Please do.
Now, Egypt now, energy-wise, is different from Egypt before. My question is, do we have surplus in our energy production, or the consumption is covered by the production?
Well, what you have referred to, Dr. El-Bahrawy, is quite important. It is actually, we have what it looks like additional generation capacity, but that is opening the way for potential exports of electricity around the Mediterranean, what we call the Mediterranean ring, which is starting why it was exporting electricity to the west of Egypt, to Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and then Morocco, and then connected to Europe, and then also to strengthen the connection between Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and then Turkey. So that is what we refer to strengthening the Mediterranean ring and allowing us to export electricity to these countries through more or less an existing physical interconnection. In addition to that, also the planned projects, interconnection projects between Egypt and Europe through Cyprus and Greece is another potential. The technical feasibility of such project is existing. Now we are looking at the financial as well as the economical attractiveness of something like that, extending also our interconnection to Africa through the Nile Basin and so on, which started with interconnection with Sudan, is another possibility. as well as interconnecting with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and eventually the Gulf area for exchanging through an energy banking scheme over 3,000 megawatts. That all shows that our existing electricity or existing capacity is ready for these interconnections. So we are not, we do have an additional capacity at the moment, but this capacity, additional capacity, will sort quickly vanish with these interconnection projects, possible interconnection projects in the future. Hopefully that answers partly your question, Dr. Ali. Hello?
Yes, very much. Actually, I have another question, if you allow me. In a
Please
previous
do.
lecture, an expert of Egypt transportation projects, he told us that because of the surplus of electricity, some of the railways like آلات الجر الكهربية في السكة الحديد. فهل دكتور محمد ممكن حضرتك تكلمنا عن الحتة دي؟ ازاي الكهرباء هتخلي السكة الحديد دي أرخص وأسرع وصديقة للبيئة؟
Well, actually yes, لأن طبعا عمليات النقل وده أحد الأمثلة اللي احنا بنقول إن هي أدوات transport vehicles in general, if they are transferred to electricity, this will add to the environment benefit of these projects, especially now that our central production of electricity is done at a high efficiency. So yes, أي 1 كيلو وات ساعة احنا بننتجه من مصادر طاقة متجددة يستعمل في عمليات الشحن الكهربي إما للقطارات، لبعض المراكب، للسيارات. ده كله هيوفر لنا من الناحية البيئية، وخصوصا إذا كان المصدر الكهربي ده من طاقات متجددة، وهو ده الأساس فيها. يبقى هنا بقى في سوق أو في طلب على الطاقات المتجددة للاستخدام في وسائل النقل المختلفة.
Thank you so much for this clarification. Now, it is the turn of the students. I'm sure, because this course, Dr. Sobki, like every specialization in the faculty is around. We have people from electrical engineering, from mechanical, from civil, and from architecture. Do any one of the students attending have questions for Dr. Sobki? Hello.
Thank you.
Somebody is speaking. Yes, go ahead.
No, I just said thank you for this lecture.
You're most welcome anytime. Anyway, Professor El-Bahrawy knows my coordinates, and I welcome any further any clarification in the future or any discussion in the future. My email is shown on the slide, and Dr. El-Bahrawy has my coordinates, my phone numbers, and so on. So I welcome any communication in the future with any of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sobki, for this generous offer. I am sure we are going to use this offer in the future, because the subjects you covered are important not only for people in the electrical engineering field. It really of interest to all engineers graduating from the faculty. Thank you so much.
Thank you, V. Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to talk to everyone today. Thank you very much.
You are very much welcome. The pleasure was ours. And thank you for your time and your interest and your general offer. And sure, we will have further communication of these important points you raised in your excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome.
Okay, Doctor. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. شباب، ما فيش حد فيكم عنده سؤال أو حاجة؟ أنا مستغرب لأن المحاضرة كانت مهمة والمعلومات اللي فيها مهمة. حد حابب يتكلم أو يقول حاجة؟ أنتوا قبل كده كنتم مور رياكتيف، هو إيه اللي حصل لكم؟ أنتوا عملتوا وحش في الميد تيرم الأسبوع اللي فات ولا إيه؟
يعني تقريبا يا دكتور، بس لا يعني المحاضرة كانت جميلة وكويسة واستفدنا منها كتير يعني.
طيب انا مبسوط ان انا اسمع كده، لان خلي بالكم الماتيريال اللي احنا اللي هي الجست سبيكر بتاعنا بيتكلم فيها هو ده اللي بنجيب منه الاسئله. فانا يعني I'm sure you will need to listen to this presentation more than once، لان فيها معلومات دقيقه جميله مفيده وكلها ليها دعوه بالناشونال ميجا بروجيكتس، زي ما شفنا قد ايه علاقه قويه ما بين مشروعات القوميه وما بين الطاقه، مش بس في مجال الترانسبورتيشن زي السؤال الاخير بتاعي، لكن في حاجات كتيره جدا الدكتور محمد ذكرها بطرق سواء مباشره او غير مباشره خلال المحاضره. طيب يا شباب، لو ما كانش في عندكم اي اسئله، احنا عندنا، عايز اذكركم بس ومعانا الباشمهندسه ميرنا، ان انتوا عندكم as we used to عندنا كويز يوم الاربع الساعه 8 بنفس الطريقه اللي احنا عملنا بيها الكويزز اللي قبل كده. the next lecture، ودي حاجه برضو مهم ان انا اقولها لكم، المحاضره الجايه هتبقى عن water supply and sanitation، وهيكلمنا فيها الدكتور سيد اسماعيل، ده المستشار بتاع وزير الاسكان، وهو استاذ عندنا في الكليه في القسم مدني. وهتكون محاضره برضه هتتكلم على مشروعات الامداد بالمياه والصرف الصحي على مستوى الجمهوريه، اللي هي من الحاجات المهمه جدا اللي داخله في اكتر من موضوع، يعني مش بس امداد بالمياه والصرف الصحي، لا دي في تكافل وكرامه وفي ديسنت لايف وحاجات كتير مهمه. فانا حبيت برضو ان انا تو ادفرتايز على الكامينج ليكتشر، ولو كان عندكم اي سؤال او لو كان الباشمهندسه ميرنا عندها اي تعليمات للطلبه، this is good time to do so.
دكتور انا عايزه انبه عليهم بس حاجات شباب. اتفقنا زي ما الدكتور قال لكم كده، ان شاء الله الكويز هيبقى الاربع اللي جاي نفس الميعاد 8 ونفس طريقه الامتحان هتكون موجوده ان شاء الله. بالنسبه بس للبروجكت اللي احنا اتفقنا عليه او الريبورت بتاعكم، بس السبريد شيت ما كانش انجح حاجه، وكذا حد ما كتبش التايتل يعني بتاع البروجكت، لان اغلبكم ما كتبش التايتل اصلا. فانا عملته قلبته جوجل فورم بحيث الناس كلها تكتب التايتل بتاع الريبورت بتاعها زي ما اتفقنا. فياريت الناس اي حد حتى اللي ملى الفورم القديمه يملى الجوجل فورم الجديده اللي على التيمز، على مايكروسوفت تيمز. لو حد مش شايف الفورم يبعت لي، هبعت له اللينك يعني، بس هي موجوده على التيمز في بوست كان حاطه باشمهندس اسمه عمر، هتلاقوا فيه اللينك بتاع الفورم الجديده، كل الناس تملاها حتى الناس اللي عملت القديم بعد اذنكم يعني.
تمام يا باشمهندسة، هو أنا عمر
تمام يا
عمر. هو بس الناس عندها استفسار بخصوص، هو المفروض يعني الديدلاين بتاع الفورم دي امتى، يعني لحد امتى الناس كلها خلصتها؟
ممكن دكتور علي حضرتك رايك ايه، نخلي الديدلاين امتى للريبورت بتاعهم لما يملوا الاسامي؟
هقول لك يا ستي، لو انتوا تفتكروا فاحنا لما جينا بصينا على الكورس، انا كنت باعت دوكيومنت بيشرح ازاي يعني ايه الفكره بتاعت البروجكت، وكنت حاطط مواعيد. فاحنا عاوزين ان احنا كل الحاجات بتاعه البروجكتس لازم تبقى available 1 week before the start of submission عشان نكون متفقين على العناوين. يعني مش عارف، انا هفتح دلوقتي دوكيومنت وانا بقراه اهو، مش عارف انا كاتب لكم اهو we should submit your report starting from the 7th week and ending in the 13th week. فاحنا هنقول يوم الحد الجاي مفروض خلال هذا الاسبوع نكون we finalized التايتل بتاعت البروجكت عشان تبتدوا تقدموها starting من الاحد الجاي. هل كده جاوبت السؤال بتاعكم؟
تمام. بس هو في سؤال ثاني بناء على ذلك. يعني هو احنا قدمنا يعني مثلا انا المجموعه بتاعتي ملينا الفورم وحددنا ريبورت تايتل. تمام. كان مكتوب في الديسكربشن بتاع الاساينمنت ان احنا نستنى ابروف من حضرتك او من باشمهندسه ميرنا على التايتل ده، هل اوكي نشتغل فيه ولا لا. فهل الابروف ده هيجي لنا ازاي، ويعني هيجي لنا امتى وازاي يعني، ولا نتوكل على الله؟
هقول لك اجابه السؤال ده. اول ما تحط التايتل بتاعك في الجوجل شيت وانا والدكتور والباشمهندسه ميرنا نشوف التايتل، هنديك الريسبونس بتاعنا immediately بحيث ما يكونش ده سبب التاخر. واخد بالك يا عمر من كلامي؟
تمام.
وبالتالي
ازاي انا مثلا وانا بملى الفورم ما حطيتش ايميل مثلا او حاجه؟
لا، ما هو الجوجل شيت ده seen by everybody as I understand، مش كده ولا ايه يا باشمهندسه ميرنا؟ فاحنا هنعمل كولم في الداتا شيت نقول ان هو approved باسرع ما يمكن عشان we don't like to keep you waiting. واخد بالك يا عمر؟
تمام.
جوجل شيت يعني everybody it is dynamic ولا ايه يا ميرنا؟
هو بالظبط. هو انا مثلا قلبته فورم، بس الفورم برضه ينفع احولها سبريد شيت، فهعملها يعني، فانا هحولها سبريد شيت اونلاين وهبعت لكم اللينك بتاع السبريد شيت الاونلاين. يعني كتب مكتوب فيها كل واحد فيكم الريسبونس بتاعه وجنبه ابروفد او لا.
تمام.
وتبقى يعني هتبقى فيو اونلي، احنا بس هنشوف بس الرد بتاع حضرتك عليه.
مظبوط.
انت مهتم قوي باللوجيستكس يا عمر، يظهر انت بتحب شغلانه اللي احنا بنعملها دي.
يا دكتور بنتعلم من حضرتك.
الله يخليك. يعني انا بس بصراحه انا زعلان منكم عشان ما سالتوش الدكتور محمد، هل انتوا ما كنتوش interested ولا you are thinking about something else، ولا ايه السبب؟ ولا انتوا زي ما انا قلت يعني طالعين من الميد تيرم يعني الطاقه بتاعتكم مش موجوده وما عندكوش يعني رغبه في الانتر اكشن؟ يا ريت حد يفسر لي. تقدر انت يا عمر تقول لنا هم زمايلك
بعد
why they didn't interact؟
هو عادة الأسبوع اللي بعد الميد تيرم حتى مش بيكون الحضور أعلى حاجة. أعتقد في المحاضرات اللي فاتت نسبة الحضور أعلى من كده شوية. يمكن
نفسي نغير الثقافة دي يا عمر، لأن في أي يعني reputable institution أهمية الامتحان بالنسبة للمحاضرة مش زي ما أنتم بتفكروا خالص. الامتحان ده عبارة عن حاجة اكتيفيتي من ضمن الحاجات وملوش يعني أولوية كبيرة قوي زي اللي أنتم بتحطوها. يا ريت في السنين الجاية الطلبة المصريين يخففوا شوية من الضغط بتاع الميد تيرم ده عليهم، لأنه هو يعني ما اعتقدش ان هو ياثر بحيث تاخدوا اسبوع اجازه في الميد تيرم وكمان حضوركم يبقى قليل في الاسبوع اللي بعديه. احنا كده وي ار لوزينج جراوند.
هو صحيح يا دكتور، ولكن اسبوع الميد تيرم ده بنكون مضغوطين فيه بشكل كبير جدا، وبنكون محتاجين ولو يعني ايام قليله بعدين يعني نستعيد طاقتنا تاني. ولكن ان شاء الله اكيد كله يعني هيجمع نفسه، وان شاء الله يكون كلنا اكتف يعني في المرات القادمه باذن الله.
تمام يا شباب. اوكي. If nobody else like to talk except عمر محي الدين and if engineer Mirna doesn't have any instructions to give to the students, we can end the meeting now. اوكي يا شباب؟
بس في اختار صغير لباشمهندس ميرنا.
اتفضل يا ديفيد، اتفضل.
لا انا عمر.
ايوه يا عمر، بتقول ايه؟
لا هو بخصوص الكويز يوم الاربعاء الجاي ان شاء الله، ايه الموضوعات المتضمنه فيه؟
ما احنا بقى ماشيين، ده احنا فيري يعني ستراكشر. الكويز الاولاني كان محاضره كام وكام؟
1 و2.
والتاني كان كام وكام؟
3 و4.
يبقى اللي جاي كام؟
5 و6.
شفت بقى السؤال اجابته سهله ازاي؟
تمام يا دكتور، بس
اوكي. ايوه يا ديفيد، اتفضل يا ابني.
صباح الخير يا دكتور.
اهلا يا ابني،
عايز
ازيك؟
اسال على حاجه، هو الكويزز دي في الاخر هيتاخد لها افريج ولا هي تبقى توتال درجات يقلل اللود شويه من على الفاينل؟
هقول لك يا ابني، احنا هنستخدم ال 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 الكويزز دي عشان نجيب الايه الانديفيدوال ديفرنسز، بس انا هختار منها ذا بيست ماركس عشان تبقى الفايده ليك اكبر ما يمكن. تمام؟ ولو كانت النمر بتاعتها عاليه هزود البرسنتج بتاعها عشان اخلي درجتك عاليه على قد ما اقدر، لان انا عايزك تاخد نمره كويسه وتنجح بسهوله وما يبقاش في صعوبه، لان انا زي ما حكينا موضوع التدريس ده لو انت مش مستمتع مش هتبقى يعني مش هتقدر تتعلم كويس. فاحنا هنصمم او هنستخدم الدرجات بتاعه الكويز for your own advantage. Did I answer your question يا ديفيد؟
يس يا دكتور.
تمام. باشمهندسة منى، حضرتك عايزة تقولي حاجة؟
لا يا دكتور تمام كده، انا ما عنديش اي حاجه ازودها.
تمام. اوكي. If nobody likes to comment بعد Mr. David, we can close this session, and we are looking forward to see you the coming Sunday. اوكي يا شباب؟ تمام. يلا جود باي.
شكرا جزيلا يا دكتور.
العفو يا ابني. لا
شكرا لحضرتك.
العفو. سلام يا شباب.